And was those interviews which were made for this film was useful for afterwards for other films, or I mean, the people you interviewed, did you cut them in the other films? Or,
yeah. Some of them are in the other films. Baron du Plessis, who was with the South African government and was in the 80s, their finance minister, is in a lot of other films. And Les de Villiers, who I have here, really a short part, who was part of the South African Department of Information and their propaganda and dirty tricks unit. He's the one who worked outside of South Africa trying to prevent the movements from being effective, and they did all kinds of things, including killing people. And he's in a bunch of other episodes. Abdul Minty, who is the Indian man who first worked with Dennis Brutus in England, is in a lot of other episodes because he was key to the whole British anti-apartheid movement, and they were one of the strongest in the world. And but most of these people are just for this episode. Mm-hmm. Most all of them.
So you weren't make the episodes parallelly, at the same time that every of 7 films were made. You made it like separately, one film, then the next one, then the next one. I mean, in the sense of interviews, first of all you interviewed people for one film, then for the second film.
No, what I did is it was a big gathering process. And the first thing I did was to go out and interview people all over the world. That's the first thing I did. Mm-hmm. And I first interviewed the older people because I was afraid of them dying before I ever figured out what the story was. So, and lots of people have died. Over 25 people that I've interviewed are dead now. Lots. And so I went around the world and did all the interviews. And
how many interviews?
What?
How many interviews are there?
135.
Huge number.
So, and then all that gets back. And when I was in those other countries, that's when I would do research at the archives and see what they had and bring that back. So it was a long time of just gathering things all over the world and bringing it.
But all 7 films were released last year. Or there was a film which was released in 2006. Was it somehow different?
Yeah, well, what happened, we finished one episode first. We finished this American episode, and it's because a man who'd been one of my advisors on my civil rights film, and he was a professor at Stanford University, he raised me $100,000 to complete that film, to pay for the archival rights. So that got completed first. That's the one that was in 2006. And it got released first.
Okay. So
and then I guess this got done next, and the bottom line got done next, and there are 1, 2, 3, and 7 were the last ones.
But no
to get
more
done.
left. There are no more left.
No, I'm not going to do it. People can do stuff later. But
okay. And what are your plans for now, for the next film?
I'm making a film that I shot in Palestine. I went there again on the auspices of the same guy from Stanford who raised me the money for that one episode. He had written a play about Martin Luther King, and it had been produced in the Chinese National Theater, and he'd always wanted me to go shoot that film, make a film about that, which I couldn't do because I was involved with this, and this time it was being produced by the National Theater of Palestine. And so he brought me there to film the play, but I thought it was too interesting a story. They were going to perform this play, and it was going to go all over the West Bank. And there was also involved an African-American group that came from America who provided all the gospel music from the era, and those people were really very devout Christians, seriously devout Christians, all of whom grew up in churches, were closely aligned with Israel because the Bible tells you they're the chosen people. And we have many, many big Christian organizations in the United States that strongly support Israel, hell or high water. But anyway, but they're not necessarily in those churches right now. So I thought it would make a fascinating story to see this play about King being performed by Palestinians and find out what the actors' lives were like in Palestine, who were playing Martin Luther King, etc. Plus what these African Americans saw and how they felt about it. Plus, there's a nonviolent movement going on, and one of the young leaders of it was actually a student at Stanford University. My friend is a professor, and he's one of the young leaders. And they're young people, much like the people in Tunisia and Egypt. And most people in my country don't see Palestinians that way. They're only portrayed mostly through the violence that gets reported, whether it's rockets from Gaza or bombs, or in the era when they were doing also a lot of terrorists blowing themselves up in the middle of Israeli shopping centers, which they did. But actually, there's been a big nonviolent movement in Palestine. It's gone on for a long time, and there's a big emphasis now to do that. And so I'm also making a film about that, and this young person. And it's, if they could ever get organized well enough to just do things that way, I think they'd be very effective. But I don't see soon that the rockets are going to stop, or the other things that are going to go on, and they've kind of split movements in Palestine between Hamas and Fatah. So, but these kids are trying to unify it and do it differently. And so I thought it's just too interesting a story not to try to make a whole film about it. So I did it on basically no money. I shot a lot myself, and I don't normally shoot. I worked with people who were not very skilled, and it was quite an adventure, but I realized that it doesn't look so bad, and I've got a lot of stuff I can work with. I have to go back one more time. But
so it's going to be released soon.
Well, I hope to get it done soon. I just kickstarted it. Do you people know about Kickstarter? Ever hear of it?
No,
Do you know Kickstarter?
No,
okay, there's actually a lot of different sites like this. And what this is, it's on the internet. It was set up for anybody doing something creative. You can be doing artwork, you can be doing, someone's writing a cookbook about cakes, and she's trying to get that funded. You basically, it's like crowdsourcing. It's become this new, fundraising tool for all kinds of people, and they have one in the Netherlands that a friend of mine, Penny Holman, is just using for her film. So because I'm grant funded, I get funded through foundations, and that's fine if you're working on something that you can wait years to finish, because it's not as immediate, but they run in cycles, and I missed all the spring cycles, and so I'm applying now to various places that they won't decide until next spring, and so I just felt this needed to get out sooner, so I did a Kickstarter campaign for it, which was very hair-raising. It was like going on a roller coaster ride, because you're sitting there wondering, is there going to be anything out there?
Yeah.
Who's going to come? You have to work through networks, and it was really scary, but there are two things that were just amazing. One, I was amazed at my friends. My friends were unbelievably generous. It's just been astounding. I didn't expect that. I did organize them to say that you've got to get right at the beginning, so when someone else comes, they can see other people are on it, and they had their little instructions. And then I lined up people who would be my networkers team. These are people who had networks. And one of them I worked through, an Israeli woman is taking an organizing course in a place that I know in San Francisco. She's totally involved in the international BDS movement. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a boycott and divestment movement. Like what they did about South Africa, people are trying to do that around Israel, to try to force Israel to come to terms and get the thing settled by boycotting them. This is what they did in South Africa. It was very effective. And in fact, they were using one of my films. Somebody actually ripped it off from somewhere in the world, I don't know where, and it ended up in Jordan, and they translated it into Arabic, and it was being used all over. In fact, I spoke with it a couple of places in Palestine. So it was, but 2 weeks after I got started, so I lined myself up with those networks, up to pop another film that's about Palestine. And this one is about a comparison between apartheid in South Africa and Israel, showing how it's apartheid. Because apartheid is now, it's condemned legally, okay, in the international world. So if you can convince the international world that what Israel is doing is just like apartheid, it actually means something. But anyway, it's, and this people who are organizing around it really want. And I actually helped these people out 2 or 3 years ago and gave them a lot of free footage, and I was really pissed off. How did they jump on? They could see I was trying to raise money. So that kind of, I thought, sort of knocked out certain sources for me that I had set up. So I had to scramble again, and you know who I was going to get. And I went through church groups, and I had this most hysterical, trying to work with one of the men I filmed for this, who was 94 years old, who had a great network, but on the phone trying to talk me through how to work stuff on his computer. It was just impossible. Finally, I had to send someone up there, but it really worked because he had a great network and got me hooked up with other networks, and so now that network started working, and somehow it all worked out. And because the way it works on Kickstarter, if you set a goal, you have to make your goal else you don't get anything. So I was aiming for $30,000, and if I didn't make it, I would see nothing. So it's very nerve-wracking. They certainly do it to push you, you know, to make sure. There's also sites like that, one called Indiegogo. They don't do that. Indiegogo, yeah, and they, you know, you can keep whatever you do. The trouble is, what they will do is take a larger percentage based on if you raise little. So they're going to take much more of your money if you raise little than if you raised a lot. So in all these ways, these sites are, you know, need to make money. Kickstarter takes 5%. But it's still really worth it, and it was the only way to raise some money, you know, quickly, to try to get this started.
I think it works with social issues. It works.
Oh, it works with, you go to Kickstarter and see what gets funded. Believe me. Horror films get funded. This is a film about my dad, and you won't believe. And these things all get funded. It's a matter of knowing your networks. People have raised money so they can compete for an Academy Award, which to me is really crazy, because I figure, get yourself a distributor and get the theaters, and then you can do it. But they've won. They've gotten it because they've got enough networks of people who believe in them or their work to do it. And many of this stuff, I had about 355 people who contributed, and a lot of it's in just $25 chunks, which is easy really for people to do. And a lot of these things get funded by lots and lots of those, you know, sort of small chunks. So it's actually quite liberating. And then the other thing that it does that's very useful, especially if you're making social issue films, is you're building your community that's going to use the film as you're fundraising for it. And then you direct everybody over to your Facebook page, and you know, you just do all of that, so hopefully by the time the film's ready, everybody's ready to run with it and use it when it's done. So it's actually quite useful, besides just
of course, it's not only fundraising, it's always getting an audience who are interested in the film, in the results.
Yeah, because I want to get this out quickly. I mean, this took over 10 years. So
yeah.
I don't want to do that again.
We could see it.
Yeah.